Your soul members, welcome to the month of July. The tarot card draw for this month is the Nine of Swords. And the overall message for this card is telling us to go a little bit deeper into our thought process and to clear out our thoughts and to kind of like get it together. This is a little bit of a check yourself kind of card, and you may be heading toward a downward spiral, and it's really your mind that has put you there. And so this card encourages you to like get out of your head, basically. So remember that the suit of swords is symbolic for our thought processes and for the way that we discern information. And your thoughts really have gotten you to this point, and hopefully that we can get out of it, right? When the Nine of Swords shows up for you, it's an indication that you're off balance and that you need to go a little bit deeper to rise above the turmoil that you're feeling. And the suit of swords deals with the intellect. And it really doesn't matter how smart you are. Sometimes you can be so overwhelmed with an emotion that you can't even see the forest through the trees. So instead of rising above the turmoil, your thoughts are all over the place. You start storytelling to yourself, and a lot of the stories you're telling yourself are negative stories and negative thoughts. And when you do that, you start to embrace negative outcomes or potential negative outcomes. And sometimes if we do that too much, we're actually manifesting negative outcomes. So we want to try to change that up a little bit. And the Nine of Swords asks us to do that. So the Nine of Swords asks you to transcend your current thought process and to shift it toward more of a truthful discernment, and to stop telling yourself stories and stop negative talk that you are giving to yourself. So the Nine of Swords is all about mental anguish. It's not really about an actual disaster. So think of it kind of like this. Once an emotion in you is triggered, if that emotion is kind of a dominant style of emotion, your mind loses control of the situation and the inner argument begins. So it's like you get an emotional trigger. That emotional trigger is more dominant than your brain, and then your brain falls in line with the trigger. And the way that you start thinking is based on the emotional trigger. So it's almost like your emotional self is directing your analytical self, and those emotions are the reason that you are having the thoughts that you do. So if you notice in the swords in this card, there's three swords that pass through the crown chakra, the throat chakra, and the heart chakras. And this means that your mind is talking you into mental anguish that stems from that emotional trigger, and we are trying to stop that. So maybe you don't like the way you look. So you start, and it creates an emotion in you, right? You've compared yourself to, I don't know, a famous, beautiful movie star or something, or even to your best friend who you might think is prettier than you, or to an actress on the TV, but maybe you don't like the way you look. And so you start to think about that, and you start telling yourself that you're just not good enough, you're not pretty enough, you're not thin enough. And maybe your boss gave you some constructive criticism about a project you're working on, and you're telling yourself that no one likes you at work, you're not qualified for the job, maybe you should just quit. So you see, you have these emotions, and then you start to tell yourself stories. So when the Nine of Swords shows up for you in a tarot card reading, it points out that you have to try to find ways to use your inner turmoil to help you grow as a person, perhaps even experience like a spiritual awakening of some kind. So instead of thinking, I'm not pretty enough, I'm not thin enough, I'm not good enough, try to counter those negative thoughts with things like, how can I learn to love myself better? What type of plan can I get on that will help me lose a little bit of weight? And what will make me feel good enough amongst my peers? And whatever it is that's keeping you up at night or giving you grief, affects you only really because you're letting it affect you, because you've gotten on this thought process that is so powerful in breaking you that it ceases to lift you up. And so what we want to do this month is pay attention to our negative self-talk and try to counter the negative self-talk with something positive that can encourage you and not break you, but help you to rise within yourself. And I think that that's what this card is doing. So I noticed that when I do tarot readings for people, this card shows up a lot for empaths. Empaths have a really difficult time keeping themselves grounded in their mind, because an empath feels emotional triggers that aren't even their own. They don't know the origin of it. So if I don't know that I'm an empath and I have an emotional trigger, it's kind of hard to stop that negative self-talk. It's kind of hard to clear out your mind because you have emotions and you really don't know where they come from. And so when the analytical self tries to help you figure out why you feel a certain way, it won't be successful because probably the emotions aren't yours to begin with. So if you're an empath, this is going to be a little bit more difficult process for you, because first you have to determine if the emotion is even yours or not yours. So we should talk about that. And I am putting up a workshop in the next few weeks about empathy. So if you think you're an empath, you should even take the workshop, even if you don't think you're an empath, because sometimes our emotional triggers do lead us off the deep end. And the workshop that I'm putting out online will be beneficial for you if you are an empath, and even if you are not an empath. But anyway, when I do tarot card readings for empaths, the Nine of Swords comes up a lot. And the deal is, don't allow your emotional triggers to control your thoughts, because if they do, you're going to find yourself having a mental breakdown or an emotional overload. Basically, just don't engage with the negative aspect of your thoughts, but rather find a way to solve the emotional triggers. Find a way to kind of like solve the emotional triggers so that you don't talk yourself into demise. And the Nine of Swords tarot card may also point out that you have a guilty conscience about something. So if you have a guilty conscience about something, because this is another reason that the Nine of Swords shows up, is when you feel a sense of remorse about something. Maybe you said something mean to somebody. Maybe you had, maybe you didn't do as good as you should have done at work. Or maybe you had an argument with a friend that you feel bad about now. And so if you have to make amends with anybody, don't waste too much time doing that, because it's going to play on your mind. So if you are feeling guilty or remorseful about something, make the amends that you need to make so that you can move past this negative talk experience that you might be having. Another interpretation of the Nine of Swords is kind of like if you've ever heard of the dark night of the soul. Sometimes when we are in a dehumanizing situation, a situation that seems too difficult to get out of, and we don't have a lot of confidence in ourselves, and we do have some negative talk kind of happening, that could all represent the beginning of a spiritual awakening. Because sometimes when we're in really difficult situations in our life, we feel very dehumanized in our emotional self. And we rack our brain trying to think of like how to make this better, and nothing works. So if you experience this downside of your consciousness and this negative self-talk that the Nine of Swords is talking about, and you try everything to get out of it, you counter it with positive information, and you make an action plan to make yourself feel better, and none of that works. And ultimately you just throw up your hands and you're like, I don't know what to do about this. And then you reach to heaven and you're like, God, just help me with this. When God helps you with it, it will awaken your soul to the truth of your body and soul relationship. So this could also be why the Nine of Swords is presenting for you. So I hope that this helps, and I hope that you find enlightenment, and I hope that you learn to love yourself better, and I hope that you don't continue doing any negative self-talk for any area of your life. Thanks for joining today. I hope to see you guys at the Pure Soul. Take care.